Hey guys, Max Rich here, and today I want to talk to you about connecting chords using licks. It's something that I hear from a ton of players that are trying to get better, and they're trying to be able to improvise little licks within a chord progression, right? Between chord 1 and chord 2 and chord 3, and so on and so forth. And a lot of players get stuck in this area, and they could play the chords, or they could play a solo, but connecting chords via licks becomes, for some reason, a lot more difficult. When you have a solo, you have a lot of time to just kind of lay back, not play something, then play a lick, and then find another idea and work with it. But when you're playing in between chords, you have a very short time span, right? And you want to convey your musicality. In between the chords is where a lot of the action happens, right? Everyone plays chords all the time because that's the majority of what you're going to be doing as a guitar player, right? But it's those in-between moments that you get to really reflect who you are as a player and express your musicality. So it's important that you're able to do that successfully in an improvisational manner. You don't want to go into a song saying like, in between the C and the F chord I will always play this lick, and then in between the F chord and the G chord I always play this lick, right? You don't want to play the same lick all the time because it gets pretty boring. And it's not reflective of who you are as a musician, most likely. So the number one thing that you can do, and I'll go through a couple examples to show you, but where you should start is you should decide on the scale that you're going to use and the location of that scale. Meaning that in the first example, and if you're following along in the tabs, well, I hope you do because it will help. The first example we're going to use basically just 3 chords. It's going to be a 1-4-1-5 in the key of C. So it's going to be C, F, C, and G. And I'm just going to throw like a rhythm together and it sounds like this. Something real simplistic, right? And the principles that I'm going to talk about here apply to whatever chords you're using, right? And the first one is, like I said, decide on the scale and the location. So I'm playing these chords here, right? I'm not playing the C here, I'm not playing the F here, I'm not playing the G here, I'm not playing the C here even, right? I'm playing the C here, I'm playing the F like that, and then I'm playing the G like this. I'm not using a bar chord, I'm using these specific shapes, right? And the licks I want to use to connect these chords have to be, number one, within the same location as these chords. So I'm not playing a chord here, jumping up here, and then trying to jump back and play a chord in time, right? Because let's face it, when you're doing this, it becomes most evident whether or not you can do this when you're playing by yourself. If you're playing with a band or a backing track, you could lay out for a second and then there's still music going on. But if you're doing this by yourself and you stop playing for a second, well, there's nothing going on. So it's a really good way to practice. If you're doing this by yourself, you can really be critical of your playing and say, well, am I successful at this or not? Because there's no one hiding my mistakes if I blow it. So that being said, the first thing, like I said, scale and location. So I know I'm in the key of C because I have a 1-4-1-5, C, F, C, G. So I know I'm in the C scale, right? And I can conceptualize the C scale as C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, right? But I also know that I could start on any note. I don't have to start on a C note, right? That's really important. And I can also think of the scale as an A minor scale, because I know A minor and C major are relatives. Some of this takes a bit of theory knowledge, but this is fairly remedial theory knowledge, so hopefully you understand what I'm talking about. If you don't, there's a couple other videos I've done that will catch you up to speed. But in any case, the example that we're going to use will take you, and we're going to try to keep our licks in the upper register of the guitar most of the time, right? And this kind of falls within the second principle I want to talk about, is that your resolution note of the lick should fall within the next chord that you're going to. So if I'm playing a C and I'm going to an F, Whatever lick I want to put in between, that's fine. I could put whatever I want within the C major scale because I've decided on C major. But the last note of that needs to be within that F chord because I'm going to essentially land my phrase onto that new chord. Now you can, depending on the rhythm, maybe the rhythm doesn't start, the F chord doesn't start on beat 1, maybe it starts on beat 2, and so you kind of have a couple extra notes before the F chord lands. But essentially what you're trying to do when you're connecting two chords is take an idea from the C, connect it to the F, and in order to do that, you begin in any note within the C scale, but you have to land on a note that makes sense in context of that F chord. So, the scale that we're going to be doing is the C scale, but we're going to be using sort of an interesting little shape here. I'm going to start essentially with the A, and I'm going to go like this. I'm basically just playing A minor pentatonic, and that's the scale that I'm visualizing when I'm picking notes to improvise with. So A, C, D, E, G, A. It's an A minor pentatonic or a C major pentatonic. It's the same set of notes. Right? So when I play the riffs I'm about to play for you, you'll understand the notes that I'm doing, right? So the first thing I want you to look for is the scale and the location in regards to the chords that I'm playing. The second thing I want you to do is check out the resolution note and how it lands in the next chord. And the third principle that really matters is the fingering that I'm using during the lick that will allow me to play that next chord. Right? Because that's really important. If you get the fingering wrong, you'll fumble as you're trying to move into the next chord. So check out this example and then I'll show you basically what I'm doing and how those three principles apply. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so I'll break each one down one by one. So I'm going from C to F. And my lick is just a simple, it's like I'm literally just climbing up the pentatonic scale. Now, but the things you want to notice, remember, are these three principles. One, the scale and the location. I'm not jumping up to this pentatonic scale and then trying to jump back to an F chord. If I was playing that C chord up here or here, maybe I would do something like that, but I'm nowhere near this position. I'm here, so I want to pick my scale and my notes from an area that allows me easy access in and out of these chords. All right? So, and the second thing is that I'm landing the end of my phrase on the next chord. So my final note is an F note, right? Like that. Now that F note happens to be part of my F chord shape, which is really important, right? And the third principle is that the fingering I choose to get there allows me to play this F chord, right? If I went like this, and I played the F up here with my pinky, right? I wouldn't be able to get to my F chord. I'd be here and then trying to jump back, right? So part of this requires a level of comfort with the neck and moving around from note to note so that you can sort of off the cuff move to a finger that allows you to play the next chord. Now let's break this down a little bit farther, right? So as I climb up, I use my pinky finger, right? Why do I use my pinky finger? If I use my ring finger, and then I went back to my ring finger here and slid back, now I have to jump from my ring finger to the F chord here, right? I have to, basically, I can get these two fingers down, but now if I want to play my F chord, I gotta quickly jump with my ring finger here. So I use my pinky finger in place of my ring finger for the entire lick. So that here I could just easily place the fingers down in order to make my F chord. That went through my head long before I ever began this lick, because I knew, oh hey, this is the chord shape I'm gonna play. Which means if I'm playing this chord shape, I have my pinky finger free. So I need to use my pinky finger as part of the lick to allow myself to fret the chord correctly when I go to land on it, right? And additionally, when I finish the lick, the melody of my lick finishes on the top note of the chord. That's a very valuable piece of information. If you could do this within inner voices of the chord, like you can make the resolution of your lick here, you know, the A that's located within the F chord, but if you make it on top of the chord, it has a much more vocal, much more solo-esque sound, right? So you can do this all over the place. The next lick is a perfect example. So right, so once again, I jump up to the top of my pentatonic scale. I'm playing the F chord, right? And I jump to the top of the pentatonic scale. I do a hammer-on with my pinky because the same principle applies. I use the same 3 fingers for my F chord that I do for my C chord, right? So that means I don't want to have to jump from one finger to the next to land my C chord, so I'm going to use my pinky. Right, so I hammer onto the A, play the G, and I do it then a quick slide from E to D, and then I can play my C chord and have my resolution be on the top note of my C chord. Notice I'm only going there, I'm not going all the way through and hitting the high E, I'm stopping at my resolution note. That's essentially my lick. Now in this case, on the F chord, what I actually did is I started on a chord tone. I started my lick on a chord tone. I outlined the F major harmony before going to the C. What I did, I hammered onto that A. That high A, that A is part of the F chord. So I'm kind of playing this F chord and then I'm saying, hey, I'm still on this F idea. And then I finish on C, which happens to be part of the F chord, but also part of my next chord, C. So I have. Now I'm going to go to the G. Right, so here, so I'm still using these same notes. Now here, I'm doing a bend. I'm doing a bend and a pull off. So I'm essentially going E, D, C, but I'm doing it real quick. And I'm basically climbing from that down to the A, back up to the C, back up to the D, and then instead of going to the E here, right, I go to an open E, right? Now that's important. Because then I go to a C, and then I play my G chord and finish my G chord on the melody note D. So essentially, that's going to be my lick. Now if I had chosen, instead of playing an open E, to play a closed E, I would have had to jump back there to get the C, which leaves a lot more room for error, right? Now I'm going to be like flying all over the place trying to get that note. Or I could have played the C here. And if I did that, that G chord would make more sense, because now I'm here, and here going to this G makes a lot more sense than here going to this G. So the fingering aspect is like massively important when you're connecting chord ideas, right? right? You see, the fingering is really easy. If you're following the tabs and you go along, you'll be like, oh, of course, that makes perfect sense, right? Now, the more you do this, the easier it will be to like get the hang of the fingering, right? And you kind of run into roadblocks and you practice, you're like, well, that doesn't work, this idea doesn't work. But it all starts with the scale and the location, right? If you can visualize the scale. Now notice I didn't play anything lower than these notes. I chose just a 1 octave A to A, right? Now you could choose more. You could play from this C all the way up to this A, right? I'm just giving you a very small box to play within because that's the best way to practice. If you can make music with a small amount of notes, then you can gradually expand your note choices and make more and more sophisticated music. But when you're practicing this, the idea is to shrink your note choice down to a couple notes, you know, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then 6, the higher A, and say, okay, those are the only notes I'm going to play, right? And I have to improvise and grab the notes using the right finger so I can get to the next chord, and I'm only going to use these 5 or 6 notes, right? Because that's important to be able to do that. Then as you get more comfortable with that, you can expand out to 7, 8, 9, 10 different note locations. Anyway, so far, okay, now this lick. Now here what I'm doing, I'm going to the G, and I know that the G is the 5 of my C chord, right? It's like the dominant 7 of my C chord, right? And one of the things that you know as you get better and better at guitar is that like over a dominant C chord, blues players will often go from the minor third to the major third. So from B flat to B. Now I haven't introduced B at all in this lick. In fact, the notes that I chose, the scale and the location, didn't even include B. It was A, C, D, E, G, A, right? It was just a perfect little A minor pentatonic scale, very simple. But now here I am including the B. So I've kind of stretched out of that scale that I've used for the first 3 notes, and I've started introducing the B. And the reason I introduced the B is because the harmony of a G chord is very different than the harmony of an F or a C chord. The B gives a sort of a dominant flavor. It wants to what's called tonicize the C. The B like pulls you into the root note because it's a half step below the root note. So when you play that B, you're really highlighting the signature characteristic of that 5 chord, that G chord, right? So I really want to outline that significant note within the 5 chord to say like, hey, this is in a very important moment because we're going to go back to the original chord. We're going to go back home to the root note chord. So in order to do that, I slide into the B. And I just do that twice, and I jump up to the high G. Like that. And then I play the D. Essentially what I'm doing is basically just making the top 3 notes of a G chord. Like if I barred a G chord, I would be playing these 3 notes. And I'm basically going, but instead of playing it that way, I'm doing it with a little more flavor by sliding into that B. And then I roll onto my first finger on the D, shift back, and I can play my C chord. So, like that. Now, like I said, all of this sounds probably very complex. You're like, oh man, you put so much thought and effort into that. And it's like, yes, at the beginning you're gonna need to, right? You're gonna fail, or you're gonna like try to like do this and it's not gonna work, and you're like, maybe I have to plan out a lick, right? Rather than planning out a lick and how you play the lick exactly, note for note, with this hammer on here and this pull off and this bend, pick simply just a sequence of notes. Like I'm gonna play A, C, D, G, F, right? Those are the notes I'm gonna play in that order. Now how I play them maybe changes, you know? Something like that, or right? And I didn't even use any pull-offs or hammer-ons, right? I can use different articulations to express those notes differently. But what I did decide on is that these are the notes I'm going to play and I'm going to play them in this order. Now, I didn't decide on how many times I'm going to hit each note. Maybe I hit note 1 3 times, note 2 once, and then the final note 3 times, whatever, right? But you basically, when you're practicing this and you're not getting it, what you want to do is shrink all the variables, right? So you pick your scale and your location that will allow you to easily get in or out of the first chord into the second chord, right? And you have to pick the exact specific notes in the order that you want to try to hit them, right? Then you have to essentially make sure that your resolution note is part of your next chord, right? And that it makes sense within the melody, right? Like you don't want to go and jump way somewhere far away, right? That makes no sense. You want to make sure that the note that you're going to is somewhat close to the rest of your melody that you've chosen, right? And then finally, the fingering that will allow you to get from one point to the other, right? Those are like super, super important concepts. So if you could try to work with that, you'll be better off. And I'm going to show you a blues example that's more sophisticated, because what we've done so far is stick within the C major, diatonic C major scale, so you could just choose the same scale for all the chords essentially and just play through them using one scale. The next example is going to be a blues example where we have to somewhat change scales, or we can change scales. So I'm going to show you how to do that. Okay, so we're going to start now with a blues example. It's not going to be a full 12-bar blues. It's like a blues progression, but shrunken down into 8 bars. So it's going to be in the key of, well, I guess we're going to be on A7. It's like an A7 blues. So we're going to be using A7, D7, or D9, and E7. Okay? And so it's going to be 8 bars. And so basically, this is the rhythm that I'll be playing. 2 bars of each chord, and then the turnaround. That's going to be the idea, right? And so what I'll do is I'll play it and then I'll break it down and I'll show you how those principles I was talking about fit into what we're doing here. So here we go. Okay, so I'm connecting these ideas, right? And I play 1 bar of my rhythm, right? Right, and then I play a lick. So the first lick, I have to decide on my scale and my location. So I'm playing an A7 chord, and it's an A7. It's basically a major chord with a flat 7. So one thing I know for sure is that I want to play some type of an A scale. And I'm going to choose an A major pentatonic scale, right? Because I know a major pentatonic scale will work over a dominant 7 chord. It's like the standard sound, right? So like, you know, you hear like Texas Flood by Stevie Ray Vaughan. Right? That's like a major pentatonic idea. So when you're playing a dominant 7 chord, major pentatonic pretty much always works over it, right? But this is the interesting thing about this example, is that within the blues, switching between major pentatonic and minor pentatonic works very, very well for a couple of reasons, and we'll talk about that. In fact, I have a video if you're interested. It's called, what is it called? I think Stop Playing Minor Blues or something like that. Start Playing Major. Because it highlights the ability for you to switch between major and minor pentatonic scales when you're playing the blues and create a dichotomy of sound and create a conversation. And that's essentially what I was doing here. So my first lick, I come out of this A7 chord, and what I do, I just basically start on the C sharp that I'm already playing. And I just climb up my A major pentatonic scale. I've decided, here's my A major pentatonic scale. 1, 2, 3, 5, 6. Those are the notes I'm going to play. I've decided, here's my scale and the location. And it's close to the chord so I can easily grab the chord and I can easily come out of the chord. I know my next chord is going to be a D7 or a D9, and so playing this scale allows me to get out of the A7 into the D9 without having to do a lot of moving around, right? So what I do, I just basically climb up 3, 5, 6, C sharp, E, F sharp, and then I do a nice little move where I slide from the flat 3, the C, down to the B. So I start by sliding out of the C upward into the C sharp, and then I slide downward out of the C into the B, and then I play the A. And then I play my D7, but I'm really only playing 3 notes, right? So my melody is that. And it's really nice because I introduce the C natural on my way up to the first note, and then on my way into the B, but then I resolve to it, right? Right? So it's like that. Alright? And then I go into my next lick, which kind of breaks one of my rules. Now here's the other thing, but before we go into the next lick. I play with my pinky here because I know my D7 chord is going to be using these 3 fingers. And so if I finish the main portion of my lick here, then I can play the next chord using the proper fingering. I don't have to do any weird fingering jumps because I played my second to last note using a good finger, so then I can play my chord, which includes my final resolution note, which is C, as the upper note of my D7 chord. It's the highest note of the D7 chord I'm playing. I'm not playing all the way through a D9, that would sound weird. It's not horrible, but I like this better. Gives a little more tension, right? And then I'm here. Now here I kind of break my rule, right? Here, I decided on the scale and the location, right? But here's the trick. I'm playing a D7, right? And I'm gonna go to an A7, but right now I'm on a D7. And I know that one of the defining factors of a D7 is that it's got a C natural, not a C sharp, right? And I was playing my A major pentatonic scale, but A major pentatonic has a C sharp. A minor pentatonic has a C natural. So over the 4 chord, over the D7, I'm going to choose an A minor pentatonic. Now an A minor pentatonic is, or it's G, A, C, D, E, right? Now why am I going up here, right? I broke my rule. I didn't pick a location that's close to this next chord, right? The reason I did that is because in my ear, I had this lick. And then to answer that, to make a question and answer sound, I wanted something high up. I wanted like a real high idea. And this is, I'm going to show you the importance of the fingering. I come up here, right? So I'm basically just climbing down E, E flat, D, C, like a A minor blues idea. And then I slide down to F sharp. I skip the G altogether. Right? G is part of my A minor pentatonic scale, and that's the scale I chose. But I skipped that for 2 reasons. One, F sharp is part of my D7 chord, and right now I'm playing over a D7 chord. But I'm also going to an A7, and over the A7, I'm going to be playing my A major pentatonic, and that also includes an F sharp. So I'm kind of blending the idea of major pentatonic with minor pentatonic in this lick. And then I finish my melody here, and I'm playing a bar because that final note is going to be part of my barred A7 chord. that. So I have right now, once again, I grab that with my pinky, because that way I don't have to worry about jumping from here and bringing my ring finger all the way. I try to use my pinky as often as possible when I know it's not going to be part of the next chord. Right, and then from there, that's the next lick. Now here, I'm envisioning this shape of my A7 chord, right? Now what I'm doing, I'm basically taking the D, this is kind of like a simplistic blues idea. Taking a D, quickly bending it to E and back, like that. And pulling off to C and going right back to D. It's basically an A minor idea. And then I play my E here. I'm playing a lot of E's because I'm going to an E chord. And then I slide into the C sharp to once again hint at my major pentatonic. And also because that's a very common piece of blues vocabulary. Going into the 5 chord, a lot of blues players, I'm sure you've all heard that. Right? That's a very good way to get into the 5 chord, is slide into the 3, 1, 5, like that. And now that puts me right here on my ring finger, which allows me to play my E7 chord in perfect fingering. Right, and then I do my little scale down on the dominant 7 chord. And then I am going to try to jump back, because now I've pulled myself out of position, right? So now I'm going to try to jump back into position via my next lick. Now here I have another A minor pentatonic lick. Right, so basically I'm just taking the B string, I'm taking the G and I'm bending it to A, and then replacing it with this A, and then playing the E. Like that. And then I finish that lick, instead of finishing it like this, with my index finger like this, because then that totally messes me up. I gotta like jump into a bar to get the next chord, which is an A7. Instead of doing that, I just finish that lick on the bar. Like that. Even though I'm only playing one note, I'm planning ahead because I know my next chord's a bar chord. Right? So that allows me to get into that chord without having to do a lot of jumping. Right there. Right? So essentially the principle of this blues concept that I'm talking about here is mixing 2 scales, right? I'm mixing a major pentatonic and a minor pentatonic. Now that takes a little more sophistication because you got to know the difference and you got to know what notes are what. And then in this example, I've used them in a couple different places. I used them here, I used them up here. I played blues vocabulary, which if you're unfamiliar with, you should learn because it's one of the greatest tools to help you improvise, because most of the time they're using major pentatonic and minor pentatonic, and you can get a ton of mileage out of those 2 scales, especially if you learn how to begin to mix them this way, right? So once again, the 3 things I want you to think of: decide on the scale and the location beforehand, right? In this case, I picked 2 different scales and a couple different locations, right? That was a little bit more sophisticated, right? But when you're beginning, pick 1 scale and 1 location, right? And then you could branch out from there. Second thing is resolve the last note as part of the chord, but it has to be within part of the chord shape. It can't just be within part of the chord. You have to be able to grab it and play the chord in one move, because that's how you're going to make the continuity between one chord and the next without a stutter where you resolve your phrase and then you have to like jump into the next chord. Make sure that the fingering, which is the principle number 3, that your fingering allows you to resolve to that note within the next chord seamlessly, because that's really important. Now the fingering part, that comes with fluidity and experience improvising and experience playing, but the more you practice, the more you'll see the correct way to finger things so that you can get into a chord easily without having to jump. But if you apply those 3 principles and take your time and pick a chord progression, it doesn't matter what it is. It's an Eagles song, a Beatles song, a Lenny Kravitz song, I don't care what it is, right? Like, pick a chord progression and analyze the harmony, come up with a scale and the location, resolve the note into the next chord, right? Make the final note of your lick part of the next chord, and make sure that the fingering allows you to play that last note seamlessly as part of the chord without a jump in fingering. You do those 3 things and you practice that over and over and over again, and you'll be able to start connecting chords via licks, and you'll be a much better player for it. So, in any case, if you guys appreciate this video, please check out maxrichmusic.com, because there's a ton of other free content like this. And I write a weekly newsletter for all my subscribers that go into like in-depth concepts like this, and you know, give them tips and personalized help and all this type of thing. So if you're interested in that, please check out the newsletter. And if you happen to be so inclined, hit that donate button on the page. It helps me create content, helps me keep cool stuff coming into your inbox each week. So thanks for watching.